Welcome to my latest and probably most unusual project I've ever done. I have made a Cutaway engine, and let me give you a little background. This engine came off of a push lawnmower. I tried to fix it, ended up finding out that there was a crack in the crankcase up in here, which basically meant the engine was useless. So instead of scrapping it, I decided to cut it open, because I get people asking me how engines work all the time. And this way, instead of telling someone how it works, I can show them. So let's run through this. This will kind of be the opposite of peeling an onion. We're gonna start in the middle where all of the basic stuff happens, and then we'll gradually work our way out, and I'll attach parts as I go along to show you the stuff that facilitates the basics inside the engine. Now, the basic principle of this engine is the same as in a car engine. It's got what's called a crankshaft, which goes around, and it's powered by this piston, which goes up and down. And it's kind of like riding a bike. Think of this joint right here as your knee, and this connecting rod as your leg, and this part of the crankshaft is the pedal. It takes combustion, basically an explosion of fuel, vapor, and air to push it down. And it's got two valves, one to let air and fuel in, and one to let exhaust out. And there are four strokes. There's the intake stroke. You can see the intake valve opening there and the piston going down. Then that valve closes. The compression stroke is next. It squeezes the air and fuel. Then the spark plug here zaps electricity between these electrodes to explode the fuel and air mixture, which pushes the piston back down. That's the power stroke. And then this valve at the bottom will open. Let me see if you can see it. And that's the exhaust stroke as the piston goes back up to push it out. And you can see the exhaust valve open there. And those are the four strokes. It just does that over and over and over again. The valves are opened by a camshaft right here. It's called that because it has cams, which are these bumps on it. As it turns, those bumps push up and open the valves. Let's see if I can get it to work. There we go. And then these springs are what force the valves back closed. The camshaft has this gear at the end of it. This gear is turned by this gear on the crankshaft, and you can see the crankshaft gear is half the size, exactly half the size of the camshaft gear. That's because the camshaft spins half as fast as the crankshaft. So for every 2 rotations of the crankshaft, the camshaft turns 1. And this is the splash lubrication mechanism right here. As it turns, it's turned by the camshaft gear. And as the engine runs, it turns and takes oil that's up to about right here and flings it up here to lubricate the rod bearing, and also up into the cylinder to lubricate the piston and the connecting rod, which goes up and into the middle of the piston and attaches right there. And then you've got these piston rings right here, and they are designed to scrape the oil down into a very thin film, so there's just enough to lubricate the piston's cylinder. And they're also designed to keep the air and fuel up here at the top end from squeezing past and getting down here into the crankcase where they're not supposed to be. Because if they get down here, they're not really going to be burned without ventilation, which they do have, but it's best to just keep it up here in the first place and not have to worry about it. And so those are the basic operations of the engine, and now it's time to start putting stuff on it to show you the rest of it. Here are the components that I'm going to put onto the engine, and I'm going to start from this side, which is where the air and fuel are pulled in, and end on this side where the exhaust comes out. So the first thing I'm going to attach is this intake runner or intake manifold, and I've cut it in half just to show you the inside of it. Not too much to see here. I mean, it's literally just basically just a pipe with a 90-degree bend at the end, and that's going to go right here, and I'm going to screw that down. I've cut slots into the heads of most of these bolts so that I can just use a couple of screwdrivers to put this thing together and pull it apart. So there's our intake runner, and then I'm going to put the fuel tank and carburetor, which on this model of engine are one unit. I'm going to put that on, and once I've got that secured, I'll get a little closer to show you the insides of it. There we go. You can see how the carburetor fits onto the intake runner. And let's take a moment to look at the basic principle that a carburetor operates on. It sprays fuel into the air going into the engine so that the engine can burn that fuel vapor and make power. Now, a carburetor, I'm going to use this bowl here to represent a carburetor bowl, and I've got water to represent the fuel. And the way it works is by using the speed of the air to pull it, to suck it up into the air. Now, I've got this straw here, and of course, if I blow into it, it's just gonna blow air down into the water. I'm going to take this straw, and I'm going to cut most of it, not all of it, so that I can bend it like that. And when I blow through it, it should suck some water up and spray it out. Did you see that spray? So now let's take a look at the actual carburetor itself. There's a brass throttle butterfly that closes to restrict the air going in to make the engine rev more slowly or more quickly when it's opened up. The black piece itself also serves its own purpose. If you look very closely, you can see it's got a curve to it. It curves down and kind of pinches the air, kind of like putting your thumb over a water hose to make it flow more quickly, and then gently curves back out to reduce some of that pressure. And that's called a venturi. And that is what allows the air to pull fuel up out of this jet right here. Now that I've shown you how the air and fuel get mixed together and then delivered into the cylinder through this valve, I need to show you how the spark plug gets its electricity. It's down to this, which is the ignition coil, and there's a magnet on this part here, which is called the flywheel, and you can see it sticks to that. It's quite a powerful magnet. And so this flywheel actually has three jobs. One is to carry that magnet past the coil to make an electric pulse. The second is, you can see these fins here, is to blow air down and around over these fins to keep it cool. And the third is to act as rotational mass to keep the engine spinning between power strokes. That is to keep the engine spinning as it vents the exhaust, pulls fresh air and fuel in, and then compresses it. Then of course there's the power stroke, which forces it back down, and that feeds energy back into spinning the flywheel, and that's how the engine keeps spinning between the bangs. All right, so I've got my coil back on there, and it may look like it's touching the flywheel. In fact, there's a very tiny space between the coil and the flywheel. You don't want it touching it, but you want it really close so that it can pick up as much energy as possible from this spinning magnet to feed into this coil right here. And then that travels down the spark plug wire to the spark plug, and it just pops right on. You can hear that click. And you know what? I'm going to demonstrate it. I'm going to take it inside so you can see the spark plug working. Before I demonstrate the spark plug in action, I'm going to take this blower housing and attach it, because it also has the recoil starter, the thing that winds up when you pull the string. It's literally just a spring-loaded pulley, and it starts the engine spinning. It turns this, which is a ratchet mechanism. On this particular one, it works with ball bearings down in little grooves, and if you turn it to the left, it spins freely, but if you turn it to the right, it locks on, because that's the way the engine spins. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this on and demonstrate both the blower housing and the spark plug. So this is about the darkest corner of the garage I can find at the moment. And let me see if I can angle this right for you. That might work. Concentrate on the very tip of the spark plug. You should see a flash of light from the spark. Did you see those little flashes? Those little flashes of light you saw were the spark plug trying to ignite the air and fuel, which of course we're not there because the engine's been cut open. All right, blower housing back off so I can show you the last two things I want to show you. The first is we've gone over the intake and the carburetor that feeds it. I also want to look at the exhaust, which is on the other side, and there's your exhaust valve, and I've cut it away so you can see the way the exhaust goes up and over the valve and down through here like that. And right here you see those threads, that's for the muffler. And as you probably already know, the muffler takes the exhaust and quiets it down. Of course, small engine mufflers aren't particularly robust. Small engines tend to be pretty loud, but a little muffler's better than nothing. And here's how it works. The exhaust comes out through the middle right here, up into here, and this little dome here curves it around into a kind of a mushroom shape. And it goes around there in its mushroom shape and up through little holes down on this part right here, up into this chamber here, and then out these holes here at the center. And that just kind of lets the air kind of get some of the sound waves vibrated out of it, so that by the time it comes out here, it's just a little quieter than it would be otherwise. And then this is the last thing I want to show you, and that's the dipstick. So the dipstick is what you use to check your oil level, and you pull it out and see, you know, if it's in the acceptable range right there between add and fill. And for whatever reason, my phone doesn't want to focus on it very well, but that goes into this hole here, and I cut that away as well so you could see how far it goes down into the crankcase. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom, and there's also kind of a low-lying spot right here for this little flinger right here, or whatever it's called. I mean, all it does is fling oil, so I'm just going to call it a flinger. If you have the technical term, feel free to add it in the comment section. And if you look at the add and full lines, the ideal oil level is almost to right here, just under there. And that's a good design because that's where the gasket is. So if it gets old and the gasket starts to leak, when the engine's off and it's just sitting in the pan, it shouldn't leak out of the gasket because the gasket's higher than where the oil should be. So that's a pretty smart little piece of design right there too. Anyway, I hope you learned something from this, or if you already knew all this stuff, I hope you simply enjoyed watching the concept you already know play out in real life.